Welcome back to the Explainer. Today, we're going to do something pretty cool. We're building a complete functional API server starting from literally nothing, an empty folder, and we'll do it all using the ChillSharp framework. So if you've ever had to build an API from scratch, you know the pain, right? All that boilerplate code for just basic stuff, create, read, update, delete. You're writing data transfer objects, figuring out routing. It's a ton of work. But what if? What if you could just skip all of that and jump straight to the code that actually matters? Well, that's exactly what ChillSharp is here for. All right, so here's our game plan for today. We're going to start with the absolute simplest API you can possibly imagine. Then, step by step, we'll bolt on all the features you actually need for a real-world app. We're talking schema intelligence, proper security, handling data relationships, and then finally, getting it ready to ship. Okay, let's dive right in. First things first, the whole point here is to see just how fast we can get a real working endpoint up and running. No bells and whistles just yet. We just want to see the core idea of ChillSharp in action. And believe it or not, it really boils down to just these 4 steps. We define our data, right? What it looks like. We define how to find that data. We tell the system where it all lives. And then we just wire it all up. That's it. Simple. Okay, step 1. We got to define our data model. Take a look at this blog class. It's just a simple C# class, right? But look closer at those attributes. Chill entity and chill property. That's the magic. These little markers are basically telling ChillSharp, hey, you see this class? I want you to expose it through the API. You're not writing controllers or endpoints, you're just decorating your model. It's so clean. All right, next up is the database context. This is basically where our data is going to live. And the key thing here, the real linchpin, is implementing this iChill context interface. See that get chill type prefix method on the screen? All that's doing is giving ChillSharp a hint, a little prefix, so it knows how to find our models. It's like giving it a map to our data. So check it out. We already have a working API, but right now it's kind of like a black box to any application trying to use it. No one knows what the data structure looks like. So let's fix that. We're going to make our API self-describing by baking that schema information right into the code. And you're going to love this. The change to our code is tiny, but the impact is massive. On the left, you see the before, just empty attributes. But on the right, we've just added simple string labels. So that property we called name in our C# code, to the outside world, it's now presented as title. We're adding this rich, human-readable metadata right where it belongs, with the data itself. And this is where it all pays off. A client application can now just ask the API, hey, tell me about model.blog, and it gets back this beautiful, structured description. Think about what that means. Your user interface can dynamically build forms, create table columns, whatever you need, without a single hard-coded label. It's a huge deal for building flexible apps super fast. Okay, so a wide-open public API is great for getting started, but in the real world, no. We need to lock the door. So let's talk about adding authentication and setting up a solid foundation for security. And again, ChillSharp makes this way easier than it should be because it just hooks right into the standard stuff like ASP.NET Core Identity. Look at this single line of code here. Add Chill Auth Identity API. With just that, boom, we've added all the endpoints for logging in, registering users, the whole deal. And check out that little option, Create Chill Auth User for Root. That's a super handy shortcut that automatically creates an admin user for you the first time the app starts up. Now, this little flag here can manage permissions. This is the whole shebang. It's the key to everything. When that root user gets created, this property is set to true. And that one property, it's like the master key to the entire kingdom. It gives that first user the power to set up the entire security model for everybody else. So let's be clear about what we've done here. Today, we've installed the lock on the front door. We've put the security framework in place, and we've created one user who holds the keys. Now, the really deep topic of how you actually define those permissions, who can see what, who can edit this but not that, that's a huge topic all on its own, and we're definitely going to cover that in a future explainer. All right, our API is now secure. So let's move on to something every single app has to deal with, data relationships. The classic one-to-many stuff. We'll use the perfect example, a single blog that has many posts. And from the client's point of view, this is just beautiful. We start a query for a specific blog, right? But then look at that change method, .with posts. That's all it takes. You're just telling the API, hey, when you get me that blog, I also want you to grab its posts. The server gets it and bundles it all up for you. And this right here, this is the real magic. All of that data, the blog and all of its posts, comes back in one single, clean, efficient network call. This completely solves that classic N+1 query problem that can absolutely kill performance. You know, the one where you make one call for the blog and then a whole bunch of separate calls for each post. Yeah, none of that here. It's a massive performance win. Okay, let's take a quick step back. Our API is now functional, it's intelligent, it's secure, and it's efficient. We've come a long way from that empty folder. So for our last section, let's talk about the practical stuff, how to package this up for deployment and make it super easy for other apps to actually use it. So a natural next step is to package this all up in a Docker container. And the trick here is to keep that Docker image generic. You do that by having it read all its configuration, like database connections or the credentials for that root user, from environment variables. That way, you can use the exact same image for your local machine, for staging, and for production, just by changing the variables. And remember that schema intelligence we added way back at the beginning? Well, here's another massive payoff. Because ChillSharp can expose a standard OpenAPI document, you might know it as Swagger, you can create a machine-readable contract for your API. And then, you can use standard tools to automatically generate fully typed client libraries for just about anything. TypeScript, Python, you name it. This saves so much time. So there you have it. We went from literally an empty folder to a complete production-ready API. It's built, it's secure, it's discoverable. But that leaves us with one final, really important question. Now that a user can log in, what can they actually do? Answering that question is all about the permission model. And he guessed it, that's exactly where we're headed in our next explainer.